ADHD, Cleaning and Organization. From cluttered to clear. Declutter your home, simplify your routines, and stay in control without the overwhelm. By Marlow Hayes. Introduction. In 1870, a room in Cambridge, Massachusetts, sat in a state of quiet, heavy disorder. The desk was made of dark wood, but you could barely see the grain. It was buried under a snowdrift of papers, medical notes, half-finished letters, and sketches of human brains. Books were stacked in towers on the floor, leaning like they might fall if someone breathed too hard. In the corner, a wash basin held water that had gone cold hours ago. The air smelled of old ink, dust, and the sharp scent of oil lamps. This was the study of a man named William James. He was 30 years old, brilliant, and utterly paralyzed. To the outside world, he had everything going for him. He came from a famous family. His brother Henry was becoming a world-class writer. But William felt like a ghost in his own life. He suffered from what people back then called nervous energy. Today, we might recognize it as a brain that simply would not sit still or follow orders. He would sit at that cluttered desk and try to force himself to work. He would tell himself to be better, to be normal, and to keep his room like a proper gentleman. But the more he tried to use his willpower, the more his mind rebelled. He felt a deep, heavy shame. He believed his messy room and his unfinished work were signs of a broken soul. He was so overwhelmed by the gap between who he was and who he thought he should be that he fell into a dark, suicidal depression. William James eventually found a way out, but it wasn't by trying harder to be someone else. He didn't suddenly become a person who loved filing papers. Instead, he made a radical choice. He decided that his first act of free will would be to believe in free will. He stopped trying to fix his whole life at once. He began to look at small, physical habits. He realized that the human mind can change its life by changing its environment and its attitudes. He went on to become the father of American psychology. Not because he was perfect, but because he learned how to manage his own unique wandering mind. The invisible weight. Most people think a messy house is just a pile of stuff. If you have ADHD, you know it is much more than that. It is a physical weight that sits on your chest from the moment you wake up. You look at the pile of mail on the counter, and it isn't just paper. It is a list of failures. It is the bill you forgot to pay, the birthday card you meant to send 3 weeks ago, and the school form you were supposed to sign. This is the ADHD tax. It is the money you lose on late fees because you couldn't find the bill. It is the cost of buying a third hammer because you can't remember where you put the first two. It is the stress of rushing to the grocery store at 5 p.m. because the food you bought on Sunday rotted in the back of the fridge where you couldn't see it. Isn't just financial. It is emotional. It is the moral fatigue William James wrote about. You spend so much energy just trying to start a task that you have nothing left for the task itself. You feel like a failure or lazy because you see other people maintaining tidy homes with seemingly no effort. You buy planners that stay empty. You buy storage bins that eventually just become bigger boxes for your clutter. The problem is not that you aren't trying hard enough. The problem is that most organization advice is written for people whose brains work like a filing cabinet. Your brain is not a filing cabinet. Your brain is a fast-moving river. Traditional systems fail you because they require you to fight your own nature. They ask you to remember things in a brain that is wired to focus on the now. This book is not about turning your home into a magazine photo. It is not about sparking joy or becoming a minimalist. It is about function over perfection. You are about to become a functionalist. This means we are going to stop caring about how your home looks to a stranger and start caring about how it works for you. We are going to build what scientists call a prosthetic environment. Just like a pair of glasses helps eyes that can't see clearly, your home is going to become a tool that helps a brain that struggles to focus. By the end of this journey, you will be able to stop the panic clean cycle that leaves you exhausted, create external brain systems that do the remembering for you, manage your home's sensory load so you don't feel pushed by the mess, forgive yourself for the ADHD tax, and move forward without shame. Set up routines that feel like autopilot instead of a prison sentence. You will become a person who is in control of their space, even if there is still a little bit of laundry in the basket. You will find that when your home stops being a source of stress, you have more energy for your creativity, your family, and your life. Sarah's Kitchen Island. To see what this looks like in the real world, we have to look at a kitchen in Austin, Texas. It is 6 o'clock in the evening on a Tuesday. Sarah Jenkins is standing at her kitchen island, and she feels like she is drowning. Sarah is 34 years old. She is a freelance graphic designer, which means she is very good at seeing patterns and colors. But right now, all she sees is chaos. Her kitchen island has become a doom pile, a place where things go to die. There is a stack of mail, a half-eaten bag of pretzels, a stray Lego, and a permission slip for her 6-year-old son Leo. Her 4-year-old Mia is tugging on her leg, asking for a snack. The sink is full of dishes from breakfast. In the hallway, a pile of clothes she calls Mount Washmore is starting to tip over. Sarah's husband Mark walks in the door. He is a kind man who doesn't have ADHD. He looks at the counter and asks a simple question. "Hey, did you ever call the plumber about the leak?" Sarah freezes. She meant to call the plumber. She thought about calling the plumber 10 times today, but the plumber's number was on a sticky note, and that sticky note is somewhere under the pretzels and the mail. "I forgot," she says. Her voice is small. Mark sighs. It isn't a mean sigh, but to Sarah, it sounds like a thunderstorm. She feels that familiar wave of shame. She thinks, I am a 34-year-old woman with 2 kids and a job. Why can't I just manage a kitchen counter? Why am I so lazy? She tells Mark she isn't feeling well and retreats to her bedroom. She sits on the edge of the bed and cries. She feels like a bad mom and a bad wife. She believes that if she just tried harder, if she just bought the right label maker, she would be a normal person. Sarah is stuck in the all-or-nothing trap. She thinks she either has to be perfectly clean or she is a total failure. She doesn't realize that her home is currently working against her brain. She is trying to use her memory to run a household, but her memory is full. She is trying to use logic to organize her mail, but her brain needs visual cues. We are going to follow Sarah over the next few months. We are going to watch her stop trying to fix her soul and start fixing her entryway. We are going to see her move from tears on the bed to a launch pad by the door that keeps her keys from ever getting lost again. The path forward. How do we get from Sarah's kitchen island to a home that feels like a sanctuary? We do it by understanding the why before we tackle the how. We will start by looking at why the ADHD brain rejects traditional tidying. We will learn about object permanence, the out-of-sight, out-of-mind reality that makes cabinets and drawers the enemies of organization. We will explore the point of performance, a concept from Dr. Russell Barkley that explains why you need your tools exactly where you use them, not tucked away in a logical place. Then we will move through the engine rooms of your home. The kitchen, how to set up a pantry you can actually see, so you stop buying 4 jars of mayo. The laundry, how to break the wash-dry-forget cycle by lowering the bar for what finished looks like. The paperwork, how to handle the mail without getting paralyzed by decisions. We will also address the invisible stuff. We will talk about sensory overload, the way the big light in the ceiling or the clatter of toys can make your brain shut down. We will learn how to build routines that don't feel like a chore, using dopamine pairing to make the boring stuff feel almost fun. Most importantly, we are going to deal with the shame. We are going to take the moral out of cleaning. Having a messy house doesn't make you a bad person any more than having a flat tire makes you a bad driver. It just means you need a different set of tools. William James eventually wrote that the greatest discovery of my generation is that a human being can alter his life by altering his attitudes. He didn't mean you should think positive and the dishes will go away. He meant that once you stop blaming yourself for how your brain is wired, you are finally free to build a life that works for you. Your home is about to stop being a place where you feel like a failure. It is about to become your external brain. It is about to become a place of peace. Chapter 1. Why does my brain hate tidying? A young man named Melville Dewey sat at a small wooden desk in a library at Amherst College. It was 1876. He held a pencil in his hand, but he wasn't writing a letter or a story. He was trying to solve a problem that most people didn't even know existed. At the time, libraries were a mess. If you wanted a book about birds, you might find it on a shelf next to a book about making bread, simply because they were the same size or were bought on the same day. To Melville, this was more than just a mess. It was a sin against reason. He spent months creating a system where every single piece of human knowledge had a specific number. History was in the 900s, science was in the 500s. If a book moved, its number stayed the same. It was a beautiful, rigid, and perfectly logical map of the world. Melville was so obsessed with efficiency that he even tried to change the way people spelled words to save time. He started spelling his own name Dewey because he thought the extra letters were a waste of space. This system, the Dewey Decimal System, changed the world. It taught us that if you just have a logical place for everything, you will never lose anything again. We have been living with Melville's ghost for over 100 years. Every time someone tells you to just put it where it belongs or use a filing cabinet, they are giving you Melville's advice. They are telling you that organization is a test of your logic and your willpower. There is just one problem. For a brain wired with ADHD, Melville's logic is a trap. The myth of the lazy mind. We have been told a story for a long time. The story says that people who have messy homes are lazy, or they don't care, or they just aren't trying hard enough. We see a desk covered in papers and think, that person needs to grow up. We see a sink full of dishes and think, they are just being messy. This is the great organization myth. It claims that tidying up is a moral act. If you are a good, disciplined person, your house will be clean. If you are a scattered, failing person, your house will be a disaster. Because of this myth, millions of people wake up every morning feeling like they are losing a fight with their own character. They buy the planners Melville would have loved. They buy the filing cabinets and the label makers. They try to be logical. When those systems fail, and they almost always do, the shame sets in. But the truth has nothing to do with being lazy. The truth is tucked away inside the front part of your brain, in a place called the prefrontal cortex. Think of this part of your brain as a CEO of a very busy company. The CEO's job is to manage executive functions. These are things like starting a task when you aren't in the mood, sorting through information to see what is important, remembering that a task exists even when you aren't looking at it. In a typical brain, the CEO is a steady, boring person who shows up at 9 a.m. and follows a list. But in an ADHD brain, the CEO is a brilliant, creative artist who is also very easily bored. If the task is exciting, the CEO works 20 hours a day. But if the task is put the mail away, the CEO goes on vacation. They literally leave the office. No matter how much you scream at yourself to just do it, the person in charge of the doing isn't there to answer the phone. The filing cabinet of forgotten things. Sarah Jenkins sat on the floor of her home office in Austin, Texas. Her back hurt from leaning against the cold metal of a gray filing cabinet she had bought 6 months ago. She was a freelance graphic designer, and she was very good at it. She could design a brand identity that was clean, sharp, and beautiful. But her office looked like a paper factory had exploded. She held a piece of paper in her hand. It was an insurance document for her car. Her heart sank because she realized she had 3 copies of this exact same paper. She had called the insurance company 3 different times to ask for a new copy because she couldn't find the old one. Each time, she had promised herself she would get organized. She had even labeled a folder "Car Insurance" in her neatest handwriting. She had put the folder inside the filing cabinet and closed the drawer. The moment that drawer clicked shut, the insurance paper stopped existing. It wasn't just away, it was gone from her universe. This is a struggle called object permanence. For many ADHD brains, if you cannot see an object, your brain stops tracking it. It's like a computer that deletes a file the moment you minimize the window. Sarah looked at the gray cabinet. It was a logical system. It was exactly what Melville Dewey would have wanted. Everything was categorized and tucked away. But for Sarah, that filing cabinet was a black hole. Anything she put inside it was lost forever. She wasn't losing the papers because she was forgetful in the way people normally mean. She was losing them because her brain was wired for visual immediacy. Her brain needed to see the world to interact with it. She realized then that her problem wasn't a lack of memory. It was a vision problem. By trying to be neat like a normal person, she was actually making her life harder. She was hiding her life from herself. The hunter in a world of farmers. Why would a brain work this way? It seems like a mistake. Why would a person be born with a CEO who refuses to file papers? In the 1990s, a researcher named Tom Hartman suggested a different way to look at this. He called it the hunter versus farmer theory. For most of human history, we didn't live in offices or libraries. We lived in the wild. A farmer brain is great for a stable world. Farmers need to focus on one row of corn at a time. They need to be patient, follow a long-term routine, and not get distracted by a bird flying past. They need to keep things in neat, organized rows. Most of our modern world, schools, offices, and even the way we clean our kitchens, was built by and for farmers. But a hunter brain is different. A hunter needs to notice everything at once. If a leaf twitches to the left, that might be a deer. If the wind changes, that might be a storm. A hunter's brain is designed to be distractible because in the woods, being distracted by a small sound can save your life. They don't look at one row of corn. They look at the whole horizon. When you have ADHD, you have a hunter's brain but you are being asked to live in a farmer's world. The mess on your counter isn't just trash, it's a collection of signals your hunter brain is tracking. You feel when you try to fold laundry is actually your brain searching for a higher value target, like a new idea or a creative project. When you try to use farmer organization tips, like Melville Dewey's decimal system, you are trying to force a hunter to stand still and count seeds. It feels like physical pain because you are fighting your biology. The dopamine tax. The final reason your brain hates tidying is chemical. There is a tiny molecule in your brain called dopamine. It is the reward chemical. It's what makes you feel a sense of accomplishment when you finish a project or win a game. In a neurotypical brain, dopamine is like a steady stream of water. When they do a small, boring task, like putting a spoon in the dishwasher, their brain gives them a tiny squirt of dopamine. It's enough to make them feel done. In an ADHD brain, the dopamine stream is more like a leaky faucet that sometimes gets clogged. Boring tasks don't provide any reward. There is no chemical squirt for putting away the laundry. This is why you can stare at a pile of clothes for 3 hours and feel like you are trying to move a mountain. It isn't that you are too tired. It's that your brain's engine has no fuel for that specific task. This leads to the ADHD tax. The ADHD tax is the money you spend on late fees because you lost the bill. It's the money you spend on a second bag of onions because you forgot you had some in the back of the pantry. It's the cost of the logical systems you bought but never used. But the biggest part of the tax is the emotional one. It's the energy you spend hating yourself for being messy. The turning point. Sarah Jenkins stood up and walked away from the filing cabinet. She didn't close the drawer this time. She looked at the piles of paper on her desk. Instead of seeing them as a failure, she tried to see them as a hunter would. She noticed that she had kept certain papers out on the desk because they were active. She needed to see them to remember to take action. The mess was actually her brain's way of creating a to-do list that she couldn't accidentally delete. She realized that organized doesn't have to mean hidden. It doesn't have to mean inside a box. For her, organized meant functional. If she could find her car insurance in 3 seconds, it didn't matter if it was in a beautiful metal drawer or pinned to a corkboard on the wall. In fact, for her, the corkboard was much better. She felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in her life, she stopped asking, "What is wrong with me?" and started asking, "How does my brain actually work?" The struggle with tidying isn't about the mess itself. It is about the gap between how your brain sees the world and how the world expects you to see it. Melville Dewey was a genius, but he was a farmer. He wanted a world that stayed still and stayed numbered. But the stars don't stay still. They move across the sky in a beautiful, swirling pattern. To a farmer, the night sky might look unorganized. But to a hunter, the stars are a map. They tell you where you are and where you are going. They are only messy if you try to put them in a filing cabinet. When we stop trying to hide our lives in drawers, we can start building a home that works with our eyes, not against them. We can stop paying the shame tax. We can begin to see that our distractibility is actually a form of deep awareness. This brings us to a new way of living. If the brain cannot find logic in a hidden drawer, we must stop using drawers. If the brain cannot find fuel for a boring task, we must find a way to make the task spark. We are trying to learn how to drive a very fast car that doesn't have a manual. It starts with a simple, quiet realization. You aren't a bad person. You just have a brain that loves the horizon more than the filing cabinet. And in the chapters to come, we are going to build a horizon that helps you find your way home without ever needing to spell your name, Dewey. Chapter 2. Designing the External Brain. Imagine a Tuesday morning that doesn't feel like a controlled crash. You wake up, and instead of the usual frantic dance, the one where you check under the sofa cushions for your keys while holding a piece of cold toast in your mouth, you simply walk to the front door. You reach out your hand. Your keys are exactly where you expected them to be. You don't have to think. You don't have to remember. You don't even have to be good at being organized. Your house has already done the heavy lifting for you. This kind of morning feels like a miracle when you have a brain that refuses to follow the rules. For years, you might have believed that if you just tried harder, or if you were just a little less lazy, you would finally be able to keep track of your life. You've probably bought dozens of planners that now sit empty in a drawer. You've likely watched cleaning hacks videos and felt a deep sense of shame when your house didn't look like the ones on the screen. But the reason those things didn't work has nothing to do with your effort. It has everything to do with where the information was kept. Most organization advice tells you to keep the plan in your head. For an ADHD brain, that is like trying to carry water in a sieve. To fix the problem, we have to stop trying to fix the brain and start fixing the room. We have to build an external brain. The discovery at the point of performance. In 1997, Dr. Russell Barkley stood before a group of people at the University of Massachusetts Medical School. He was there to talk about how the human brain manages itself. At the time, most people thought ADHD was just a problem with paying attention. They thought people with ADHD were just easily distracted by shiny objects or loud noises. Barkley realized something much bigger. He saw that ADHD wasn't a knowing problem, it was a doing problem. He watched brilliant people, doctors, lawyers, artists, who knew exactly what they were supposed to do. They knew they needed to pay their bills. They knew they needed to put their keys away. They knew they needed to start their work on time. But when the moment came to actually do the task, their brains simply wouldn't fire the right signals. He called this the point of performance. Think of the point of performance as the exact time and place where you need to do a certain behavior. If you need to take your medicine every morning, the point of performance is the kitchen counter at 8 o'clock in the morning. If you need to mail a letter, the point of performance is the moment you walk past the mailbox. Barkley argued that for most people, their internal CEO, the part of the brain that plans and remembers, works just fine. They can carry the to-do list around in their heads and pull it out when they need it. But for the ADHD brain, that internal CEO is often on a permanent coffee break. The information is there, but it's locked away where you can't reach it when you actually need it. This was a massive shift in how we think about organization. If the brain can't hold on to the information, we have to put the information into the physical world. We have to externalize it. Barkley suggested that we should stop trying to teach people with ADHD better memory skills and instead start building prosthetic environments. Think about a person who is nearsighted. We don't tell them to try harder to see the signs on the highway. We don't give them a planner to help them remember what the signs might look like. We give them glasses. The glasses are a prosthetic for their eyes. They fix the environment so the person can function. Building an external brain is just like putting on a pair of glasses for your executive function. It's about making the house do the work that your brain finds too difficult. The cockpit and the checklist. To see what a perfect external brain looks like, you only have to look inside the cockpit of a commercial airplane. Pilots are some of the most highly trained people in the world. They have thousands of hours of experience. They know how to fly the plane. Yet, they are never expected to rely on their memory. If a pilot is about to land a plane, they don't just try to remember to put the landing gear down. They have a physical checklist. They have lights that turn red or green. They have a co-pilot who watches them perform the action. The environment is designed to make it almost impossible to forget a step. The cockpit is a high-stress, high-information environment. It is built for a human brain that might be tired, distracted, or overwhelmed. It uses visual cues and physical toggles to keep the plane in the air. In your home, you are the pilot. But most of our homes are designed like empty fields rather than cockpits. We have a junk drawer in the kitchen, a pile of mail on the dining table, and a closet of mystery in the hallway. There are no lights to tell us what to do next. There are no checklists on the walls. We are flying blind, and then we wonder why we keep crashing into the same problems every day. When we design an external brain, we are trying to turn our homes into cockpits. We want to place the tools and the reminders exactly where the doing happens. If you always forget to take your vitamins, putting them in a cabinet is a recipe for failure. Your brain follows the rule of out of sight, out of mind. If you can't see the vitamins, they don't exist. But if you put the vitamin bottle right on top of your coffee mug the night before, you have created a point of performance cue. You can't get your coffee without touching the bottle. The environment has made the decision for you. Sarah's entryway battle. Sarah Jenkins sat on the floor of her entryway in Austin, Texas, feeling like she had just lost a boxing match with her own house. It was 8:30 a.m. Her kids, Leo and Mia, were finally in the car with her husband Mark. But the morning had been a disaster. Sarah had spent 10 minutes looking for her car keys, which she eventually found in the pocket of a coat she hadn't worn in 3 days. Then, she realized she had forgotten to sign Leo's permission slip for the zoo trip. She had seen the paper on the kitchen island 2 days ago, but now it was buried under a stack of grocery store flyers and a half-finished coloring book. "I'm a freelancer," she whispered to the empty hallway. "I manage complex graphic design projects for big companies. Why can't I manage a piece of paper?" Sarah felt that familiar weight of shame. She felt like she was failing at the easy parts of being a grown-up. She had tried buying a beautiful leather-bound planner, but she forgot to look at it. She had tried setting alarms on her phone, but she would snooze them and forget why they were ringing in the first place. After reading about Dr. Barkley's point of performance, Sarah decided to try something that felt a little bit silly. She went to a local store and bought a bright, neon orange plastic tray. It was ugly, and it definitely didn't match her home's creative professional vibe, but it was impossible to miss. She cleared a small spot on the table, right next to the front door. She told herself, this is the launch pad. She didn't try to organize the whole house. She didn't try to clean the kitchen island. She just made one rule. The keys, the wallet, and any paper that needs to leave the house must live in the orange tray. The first few days were hard. Her brain wanted to just drop the keys on the nearest flat surface, but every time she caught herself, she walked the keys over to the orange tray. She also mounted a simple wire basket on the wall, right above the tray. She labeled it, outgoing. A week later, the miracle happened. She was heading out the door, and for the first time in years, she didn't have to think. Her hand went to the orange tray like it was pulled by a magnet. The keys were there, the signed permission slip was in the outgoing basket. She didn't feel like a failure. She felt like someone who had finally put on their glasses. The history of the divided home. It might help to know that for a long time, houses were actually better for ADHD brains than they are now. If you went back to the late 1800s and walked into a typical home, you would see a lot of very small, very specific rooms. There was a scullery for washing dishes. There was a pantry for storing food. There was a laundry room, often tucked away in the back. There was a parlor for sitting, and a dining room for eating. Each room had a very clear purpose. When you walked into the scullery, your brain knew exactly what mode it was in. It was dishwashing time. The physical walls acted as a boundary for your attention. In the modern world, we have fallen in love with the open-plan house. We want the kitchen to flow into the dining room, which flows into the living room. We want big, airy spaces with no walls. For a neurotypical brain, this is beautiful. But for an ADHD brain, an open-plan house is a sensory nightmare. When Sarah sits at her dining table to work on a design project, she can see the unwashed dishes in a sink. She can see the laundry pile on the sofa. She can see the toys scattered across the rug. Because there are no physical boundaries, her brain is constantly bombarded with reminders of all the things she isn't doing. This leads to task paralysis. She is so overwhelmed by the visual noise of the open space that she ends up doing nothing at all. This is why building an external brain often involves creating zones that mimic those old-fashioned rooms. It means using rugs, bookshelves, or even just different lighting to tell your brain what is supposed to happen in a specific spot. Creating visual transparency. One of the biggest enemies of the ADHD brain is the opaque cabinet door. In a traditional organized home, everything is tucked away behind wooden doors or inside solid-colored bins. This looks very neat to the outside eye, but for us, it's a graveyard. Think back to the object permanence we talked about. If you put your extra light bulbs in a solid white bin and put that bin on a high shelf in a dark closet, those light bulbs have effectively ceased to exist. When a light bulb blows out 2 months later, you won't remember you have extras. You will go to the store and buy more. This is how the ADHD tax happens. You spend money on things you already own because your house is hiding them from you. The external brain needs to be transparent. This is why professional organizers who work with ADHD clients often suggest taking the doors off of cabinets or replacing them with glass ones. It's why clear plastic bins are your best friend. You need to be able to see your inventory without having to open anything. In the cockpit of a plane, the switches aren't hidden behind a decorative panel to make the room look cleaner. They are right there, visible and labeled. Your kitchen should be the same way. If you use clear containers for your cereal, flour, and snacks, you can see exactly how much you have left just by glancing at the shelf. You don't have to remember to check the box. The power of the body double. Sometimes the external brain isn't an object at all. Sometimes it's another person. There is a concept in the ADHD community called body doubling. It is the simple act of having another person in the room with you while you do a task. They don't have to help you. They don't even have to talk to you. They could be reading a book, working on their own laptop, or even just sitting there scrolling through their phone. But their physical presence acts as a tether for your brain. For many people with ADHD, working alone is like floating in outer space. There is nothing to keep you focused on the task at hand. You start cleaning the kitchen, but then you find a stray sock. So you go to the laundry room, where you notice the dryer is linty, so you go to find the vacuum. And 2 hours later, You are in the garage looking at old photo albums. When a body double is